Hey everyone, I appreciate all the support and everyone watching the videos. I've been getting a lot of questions that I've been reading of yours down in the comments. I wanted to take some time with answering the subscriber Q&A. Let's get into it. Here's a great question around zero DT and evaluating strategies is when would I consider the edge of a strategy is gone? And when would I consider dropping or sizing down a strategy while I'm trading it and see the results degrade over time?
Is first off, you need to look at the test. So like if you have multiple filters on it or you're excluding any types of days already, that's already a massive red flag. And the real question is it probably never worked in the first place. So there wasn't an edge and you're just made it up. Like the joke I like to say is if Option Omega had a filter for how many babies were born each day of the week, you could probably find some great alpha based on, the amount of babies that are born on certain days of the week. But being more pragmatic, assuming you have a strategy like Tammy that's executing the same thing each and every day with the exact same mechanics, not filtering out anything, the first thing I would basically do is I would look at, okay, is it matching my back test so the assumptions are correct? Like Tammy talked earlier, was it slippage? What is forever? And then the next thing I would do is I would basically run like a 2-year walk forward analysis with 3 to 6 months out of sample. So basically what that looks like is, let's say you're like, you are not including any data for the past 6 months because you would have tested it for a long period of time ahead of time. And basically you could do it every month or every 3 months, you move that 2-year period forward so that prior 6 months is always excluded. So like we need to give time for these things to work out, like sizing down. If you're size too large, you should always do that. But to actually have confidence that an edge or risk premium has degraded, we need to know the quality of what we're putting in first. Then we need to analyze it unbiasedly. That's not taking out any filters. That's then making sure our back tests match based on our commission cost and assumptions of execution. And then that's basically walking forward the data set. And the idea of walking that forward and keeping that prior period out of sample is our emotions are not going to get in the way of that prior 6-month period. And also by doing that, there should probably be a consistent pattern of where we see the degradation of this performance coming down. And we're also able to see that through a period of time while bringing that time forward. So every time we walk it, we're now including what is known because we realize that the market can change and that risk premiums or edge can't come in and out of favor over time.
So this one's really important. I know a lot of people have interest in limiting their drawdowns. And the question is, what is the best way to hedge against a zero DT portfolio to limit the cost or the bleed of that portfolio for buying those long options?
If you size at a reasonable size, you're never going to pay volatility drag. So 25% drawdown, you need an 8% gain to get back to even. That could throw it away. The next thing I would say is like using, the world's orthogonal, which basically means like uncorrelated. But I think what a lot of people miss with that is, if you do MEIC every hour, you are relatively correlated, but sometimes it can hit you. Like I say, a good rule of thumb is your trades, if they have the same mechanics, are about as correlated as the time they're exposed. So if you have a trade on 10, you have a trade on 11, they're exposed for 80% of the same hours, they should be relatively correlated with that. But when you start mixing in a trade that has a 3x stop and starts at the beginning of the day versus 1x stops at the end of the day, and then you have something that's buying an option instead of selling an option, it's a much easier way to go about hedging when you mix in a calendar, something overnight, a long volatility strategy, and you just try to maximize the profits of all of those and don't really focus on how they offset each other that much. And then just work on the size, and that'll naturally kind of make a hedge similar to how Tammy does MEIC and METF. They're both profitable strategies, and she just kind of sizes them in a way that they can help her make money each day. So that's a form of hedging that you back into. Whereas if you think I put risk on, how do I offset this risk? You have to understand that if you were to do that perfectly, there'd be a 1-to-1 ratio. So like a perfect hedge, there's no possibility of making money, which is what you don't want to do. And whenever you introduce that hedge, you're going to realize what's called idiosyncratic risk or risk that is unknown. So if something is 0.8% correlated, that means 20% of the time, the movements are unexplained by one another. So that's generally how people will do a hedge when they sell an option and they buy an option. But if we do that with just multiple different strategies and you have one that's 0.2 correlated, one that's 0.8 correlated, those will naturally just use that idiosyncratic risk in the same way, but they're all profit centers for you. So that's like the simplest back of the napkin way I would recommend doing it. And you can kind of benchmark that to adding these in. How does it affect my portfolio? How does it decrease my standard deviation day to day? How does it change the next drawdown?
This is another good one that I think comes to the mental side of zero DT trading, and it talks about what do you do with these large P&L swings in zero DT, seeing a very positive day go to a negative day, and then how do you handle that emotionally, and do you have any tips around handling that?
Yeah, I would say like obviously everyone gets an emotional flush from when you lose. It gets a lot easier if you're like financially independent or if your size is a small percent of your P&L. But one thing I would encourage people to do is like, it's similar to like when you work at a job, you like people kind of like to bond over having worked too much or that they want more money or whatever that is. And it's like when you behave with your mind and your body, like I literally used to have a phone call with this one guy, like every time after he get a bad loss. And he was really like, kind of messed up for it because he had a lot riding on his trading more than me. And like groveling over that, it was productive for like one or two times when it's a bad day and you want someone to talk to. But like when that's your habit, you're like re-normalizing and playing into this feedback loop that like the market makers got us, this is happening, low VIX is going down. And by you behaving that way, you're just making it harder for you to do it. It's similar to like, like I run a hedge fund and it does really well and it's monetarily lucrative. But like if I go on Instagram, for some reason, everyone selling courses is like way wealthier than me, which like can't be possible really. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, that's not good for your mental psyche. And like, you need to stand guard to the door to your mind. And similar to what Tammy and Dale talked about is it's like, if you just practice the act of being grateful or gardening and doing something else where your entire life is not revolved around trading and you bonding with other people because you don't have as much social interaction over losing and trading, like that's how you're going to feel. So I would say like outside of trading, really try to cultivate habits of like your health is the most important thing. Like your family is important. Your trading P&L really doesn't mean anything in regards to the grand scheme of your life. And if it did, you'll probably have a higher quality of life not doing it. So it's like your underlying self as a person is what's going to determine how you handle losses in trading. And it's like an exercise in honesty. Like personally, I don't enjoy them, but losses and drawdowns make my trading better significantly because it gets me curious about what's happened and I get a real-time diagnosis of what's going on. So like losses make me more money than they ever have before. And they continue to make me more money than they ever have before. And like even comparing this low VIX or lower bound of VIX, like from this year to last year, mounds of improvement. So that's kind of the perspective and thought process that I would just encourage people to take a belief and just be curious of how you're using your physiology and acting.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. And if you have any more questions, please put them in the comments below. Or if you're interested in a live Q&A like this in the future, let me know in the comments. I'll see you guys on the next one.